and welcome to Gonzaga's housing webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We're just so excited to have you here and excited that you're considering Gonzaga. So my name is Sarah Welchel and I work as one of the admission counselors here at GU. And I'm joined today by my colleague Alexa Gasky. She's an assistant director for the assistant director for the Office of Admission. We're both going to be just in the chat today in the Q&A, helping to moderate any questions that might come through. And then we also have 3 representatives with us from our awesome housing team. So we're joined by both Dory and then Sam and Josephine, and they're all going to get us started. So I'm now going to pass the mic to Dory, our assistant director for housing.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Dory Veron. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm one of our assistant directors in housing and residence life. I am also going to be in the Q&A answering your questions as they come through. I'm really happy to be chatting with all of you today, and you're going to have a great time with Sam and Josephine. I'm going to pass it on to Sam, who is from our housing operations team and also one of your facilitators this evening.
Thanks, Dory. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Groth. I am assignments coordinator in the housing operations side of things. I am originally from Indiana, so I'm actually not from Spokane, but I've been in Spokane for about a decade plus, and I've been at Gonzaga for about 7 years now. I am going to also pass along to Josephine to let her introduce herself because, like Dory said, she will be partnering with me in this presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. My name is Josephine Orlando. I'm one of the residence directors here at Gonzaga. I'm originally from Seattle, Washington, and I'm actually a Gonzaga alum. I got my degree in psychology and communication studies here from Gonzaga in 2022. And I've been working back at the university for not quite a year yet, but I'm glad to be back in the Zag family.
Awesome. So without further ado, we will get started. So today we're going to be going over housing options and selecting for incoming students. So we're just going to do a brief overview of what we'll be talking about today. We're going to be talking about housing and residence life, kind of talk about where the office is located. We're going to talk about housing options, LLCs or living learning communities. And we'll also be talking about traditional style housing, which is what most first-year students will be living in. We'll go over Gonzaga residential experience, and then kind of the process of housing selection, the timeline, roommate matching, room selection process, and picking the right room. We say that in quotations just because that might mean different things for different people. And then at the end, we will leave some time for some questions. Alrighty, so just a brief overview of the housing department. We are located on the 2nd floor of Crosby Hall. If you're not familiar with campus, as you can see from the picture, it does have a big statue of Bing Crosby out in front. I would say our office is centrally located on campus. If you're looking at Crosby Hall, to the left of us would be Hemmingson Center, behind Crosby be Foley Library, and then in front of Crosby would be one of our older, more traditional resident halls, and that is the SMET. So it's very centrally located. In the office, we do have 17 professional staff members, including 8 RDs or residence directors. They do oversee all on-campus housing and also some off-campus properties as well. You see at the bottom, we do have our contact information. Feel free to take a screenshot of that. We have our phone number, our general housing email, as well as our Instagram handle. We do post on that, housing updates when applications open and just general information. So that might be nice to follow just to keep updated. And then, like I said, we do have the email. Feel free to always, if you have any general housing questions, you can always send that email and someone will get back to you. All righty. So housing and residence life continued. We do have approximately 3,000 students who live in Gonzaga housing. There's 21 different residence halls. Those are comprised of 10 traditional style, as well as 7 suite style and 4 apartment style. There is a two-year live-on requirement. We're going to be talking about that as we go forward. That'll be a common theme. First-year students do live in mostly traditional style. And then second year, we do have more suite style, apartment styles for those students. All righty, so housing options for incoming students. So as I mentioned before, we do have what we call LLCs, or living learning communities. And what these are themed housing options for students with shared interests or academic goals. We see it as a way to create further community in residence halls as students engage socially and academically with their peers who have similar interests. These were designed in partnership with academic or educational departments. We've heard firsthand from students as the year goes on and it gets more academically rigorous. These LLCs, these communities, are a way, something to fall back on, a structure and a support system that students greatly benefit from. And it's also a unique opportunity to connect with faculty outside of the classroom. So you can connect with faculty inside your residence halls, along with your fellow peers who have a similar passion as you. And another way we like to connect or create community is through meaningful programming and excursions that are related to the theme of the LLC. And that could include trips to the city of Spokane and other activities building that relationships and communities. Now, as you see on the screen, we did list all the LLCs that we do offer, and as you notice, they're kind of broken up between the different residence halls. Each LLC is connected to a certain residence hall. So for instance, Coghlan does house the majority of our LLCs. We have Cura Personalis, which is Latin for the whole person. So if you're interested in, a holistic approach to life, that could be something that'd be interesting to you. Engineering and computer science, if you're more focused on the hard science, global citizenship, which is focused around what it means to be a global citizen. Learns to lead. If you want to practice leadership skills, focus on leadership skills, and sharpen those, that would be a good LLC. If you're kind of looking at these LLCs and you're seeing that you might be interested in a couple of them, the Pamplona Integrated Learning Community, that kind of ties multiple LLCs into one, so it's a little broader. And then Pre-Health, and then People for and with Others, which just focuses on the social aspect and serving the greater Spokane community. And then in Dillon Hall, we do have honors. So if you did get accepted into the honors program, you would be placed in Dillon. So that is something to keep in mind if another LLC does seem intriguing to you. During the application process, you would want to opt out of honors. But if you were in honors, you would be in Dillon. And Dillon is a suite style. And it actually is a mix of first year and second year students. So that could be appealing to you if you're in honors, to potentially network with second year students, kind of pick their brain, talk about their experience as a first year student. Could definitely be very beneficial for you. And then Marion Hall houses our Outdoor Pursuits LLC. And that is connected actually to GU Outdoors, which is a department on campus that focuses, as the name, outdoor activities, whether it's water-based, could be hiking, it could be seeing other parts of the state of Washington. So if you do like the outdoors and maybe don't have a lot of experience, that could be a nice jumping point for you to be with a community who is taking on those adventures. Or if you are a real outdoor enthusiast, that could be great for you to continue to hone those skills. And then, like I said, be in a community that shares that similar passion. And then these are just some visuals of the different residence halls that do house the LLCs. The Coghlan is to the left, like I said, houses the majority of them, and then Marion Hall does have the Outdoor Pursuits LLC. All righty. So this is kind of a timeline of the process, the application process. As you see, the LLC application actually is available already on Zag Living. When I say Zag Living, that is our housing portal. And so that's going to be a tool that you're going to use for the majority of your time at Gonzaga. And so it's going to have, applications, different forms. So it is important to get familiar with that, but the LLC application is available on Zag Living as of now. April 1st, that is when the first review of LLC applications will happen, and then notification of admission will take place April 3rd. Two things could happen. Either you'd be accepted into LLC or potentially put on a wait list. And then that cycle kind of repeats itself twice. May 1st is when the second review of LLC applications take place. And then May 3rd, the notification is sent out. And then the final review is going to be June 1st. And then the admissions notification will be sent out on June 3rd. So by June 3rd, you'll definitely know if you are a part of an LLC. And that is important when it comes to roommate matching, as you see on June 5th, because that opens up. And if you are a part of an LLC and you do want to live with other people, a part of LLCs, you'll know then and be able to start matching with people. And we will go over what roommate matching looks like and how to do that in later slides. And then now I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Josephine, who is a resident director, and she's going to go over the other traditional halls that I didn't mention that are not a part of the LLCs, as well as the Gonzaga experience.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. So just like Sam said, if you're not interested in joining an LLC, I do want to mention that there are many ways to find community on campus, even if it's not through an intentional living learning community. So even if you decide not to do a living learning community, you are able to find community here on campus. So Sam, if you want to go on to our next slide there, I'll start by kind of sharing a bit about what our traditional style rooms look like, also kind of known as corridor style rooms. What you'll see is double rooms with double furniture sets. So the image kind of shows an idea of what you would look like if you were going into our normal traditional style rooms. You'd have twin beds, wardrobes, or built-in closets, depending on the dorm that you're moving into, desks and chairs provided, as well as dressers. We also have loft kits available upon request. These are limited, so we recommend you submit that request sooner rather than later. A loft kit is basically gives a couple of options for individuals in how they want to raise their beds prior to arrival to campus. Something I do want to mention that can sometimes get confusing for individuals who work through submitting loft kits is there are two different options you can do. You can loft your bed or you can raise your bed. Just as a reminder, lofting your bed would be raising your bed to almost a bunk bed style. This has allowed students to put their desk under their bed or allow for space for additional furniture items that they're moving onto campus. Versus raising your bed. Raising your bed would just be raising your bed just a couple of extra inches. This has allowed students to put their mini fridge under their bed or allow for additional storage space. So we just want to make sure your room is how you requested it upon your arrival. Getting things shifted after your arrival can take some time depending on the quantity of requests that our facilities department gets from students upon move-in. So that's just something to note. We also have shared bathrooms on every floor or wing that are cleaned daily. And again, like Sam had mentioned, the traditional style dorms is the most common housing option for our first year students. here Sam is showing we have Alliance House and Roncalli House. We'll start showing you a couple of pictures of our traditional style dorms, as well as the amount of beds that they offer. So here we have Cremont Hall, Lincoln Hall. These are the previous halls shown were our small single gender houses. So Alliance House is all female gender housing. It has approximately 40 beds in it. Roncalli House is our small single gender housing for all male gendered students. This has approximately 40 beds. And then moving on to our small all gender housing, we have Cremont Hall. This houses approximately 60 beds. Lincoln House, which is also another small all gender housing, houses approximately 40 beds. And then we'll be moving into some of our larger single gender halls. DeSmit Hall is one of our first residence halls here on campus, well beloved. It is our all male gender hall here on campus, hosts approximately 120 beds. And then we have our Welch Hall, which is our all female gender hall, hosts approximately 100 beds for residents. And then moving on, you'll see quite a big shift in the amount of residents that are in our larger all gender halls. Our Catherine Monica Hall hosts approximately 340 beds. And then our Madonna Hall, which hosts approximately 150 beds. So something I wanted to mention before going into gender inclusive housing is that we want to show these images and numbers of our traditional style housings for you to get an idea of what you think will best fit your needs when you're coming into Gonzaga. There can be a misconception that larger halls or halls that might have a reputation for being more social halls are the only option to find belonging here on campus. In fact, our students find belonging in any of our residence halls. It really just matches the needs of the students going into that space. Obviously, Catherine Monica Hall with 340 beds has a lot more foot traffic, a lot more individuals to meet in that space, but might not have the opportunity have a more closer, small knit community that you might find at one of our smaller halls. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're looking into our traditional style houses. And then going forward into gender inclusive housing, in alignment with our mission as a university, we also want to develop a residential climate that's positive, respectful, inclusive to all of our students. So we do provide gender inclusive housing. This is just to provide safe, affirming, and inclusive community and living options for our students, including but not limited to those with the listed identities and lived experiences on the screen. These indications, so you would indicate a need for gender or a want for gender inclusive housing on your application. These indications help assist us in the roommate matching process. And there's also an opportunity to indicate allyship on your housing application as well. And then our housing assignments team will reach out to those individuals based on your responses to discuss those different housing options. And then moving forward, I'll talk a little bit about our Gonzaga residential experience. And we'll start out kind of talking about our office's mission as housing and residence life. So Sam, if you want to move on to that next page, awesome. So our mission as housing and residence life is housing and residence life create safe, inclusive, and dynamic communities that empower students' holistic development through social engagement and experiential learning. So it's a pretty lofty goal, but we try our best to meet it as we can. You can tell from even our housing options, we hope to provide as many opportunities for students to engage with one another and find belonging in their residence halls, whether it be passing each other in the hall, through a classroom experience, through LLCs, programming, etc. So some things to expect that try to help us reach that mission statement are on the next slide. So I'll start with community meetings. We have our resident assistants, which are current students at Gonzaga who live in the hall and work as mentors and leads and aides to students throughout the year. These community meetings are held throughout the year, but the first ones start at the very beginning. These are done to help walk through expectations for students on what they can expect when they are living in the residence halls, as well as creating community agreements and as a way for our resident assistants to gauge what are some things that are of interest to their residents to inform their programming throughout the year and what kind of events they want to bring their residents to. This is also a time for residents themselves to know what to expect from their RA in terms of availability, different things that the RA can assist them with throughout the year, and as a way to kind of start building that rapport as a great support system for them. Additionally, we have floor and building-wide programming. All of our programming is based on the theme of belonging. This is to ensure students are given opportunities to continue to connect with their peers as well as the campus throughout the year. So all programming that's being done by RAs are, we hope, being informed by their residents in what interests them, and also ensures that there's ways they can start feeling that sense of belonging and connection to campus. Our RAs also do what's listed on here as one-on-ones and small group hangouts. These are also known as by students as social rounds and relationship builders. Social rounds are basically when the resident assistant goes. I thought of them in undergrad as knock and talk. So go knock on residents' doors, doing a check-in for the week, seeing how everyone's weekend was, what's going on in school, things like that. So a great way to just do a check-in throughout the week. And then our relationship builders are informal events that our resident assistants can bring students to. So these could include watching a movie together, going to one of our many cultural club events on campus, going to a sporting event. We have baseball season coming up, so going to a baseball game, things of that nature. And then we also have signature events, which are larger programs done which are open to our all campus and all of our students. So some of these signature events listed here, Bulldog Bowl is a big flag football tournament that's done between multiple resident halls. We also have Fall Fest, which happens around October, November. And that has different fall crafts and activities. We also we've done an event in the past that I personally lead. It's called Haunted Halls. We turn one of our dorms into a haunted house, which is a much beloved event here. So those are some, just a little bit of what we try to do to ensure we're meeting that mission as a department. All right, and then Sam, if you want to go into our living, learning, community goals.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the previous slide, the LCs have specific learning goals and programs based on these goals. It's definitely a very community focused, as well as academically driven. As I mentioned, students do find that the community base really helps them out as they're going through their academic year, and the RAs as well are there with them, helping them through that, which may include, off-campus retreats, trips, excursions, potentially going to, a baseball game, going to the greater Spokane downtown area, as well as may include specific core class requirements and enrollment with those. And then with that being said, we will jump into the housing selection process. So previously I went over the living learning communities and kind of the timelines. And then we're going to go over the general housing selection timeline. And so as you see, the date we do list that the housing application opens is actually upon acceptance. And the next slide, I'm going to talk about a couple caveats with the timeline, but I'll say first is you don't actually have to be enrolled in Gonzaga, and you actually don't have to put down a deposit to apply for housing. And so we really strongly encourage students to apply as soon as they are accepted, just in case. If you do decide to enroll, that way your housing application is complete. Because once the housing application is complete, it does determine the time slot in which you'll be able to select housing. So that is important. This year, we actually pushed back our dates roughly a month. So this year, the housing app will be due on June 1st. So that is the deadline to complete the application. That's another reason why we just encourage students to complete the application as soon as possible, just so you get it done before the deadline. Like I mentioned with LLCs, June 5th, roommate matching begins, and that is for LLCs, general population as well. And then June 11th, we will be sending out the time slots. So we'll be emailing those out to students. And then June 12th, the LLC room selection will begin. Now, if you are accepted to an LLC, when you go to select a space, you'll only be able to see the resident hall that applies to that LLC. So if you're doing Learns to Lead or Cure Personalis, you'll see Coglin. If you get accepted into Outdoor Pursuits, you'll see Marion. And then if you're in honors, you will only see Dylan. So it is something to consider when talking about LLCs. You'll only be able to select from those buildings. And then June 13th, room selection does begin for the general population. And then on the 16th, that'll be the last day to select a room for applications that were submitted by June 1st. So as I mentioned, there are a couple more information, more caveats when it comes to that is submit your housing application as soon as possible. When you do submit the application, it impacts your selection or your time slot. Other housing selection processes are a little bit different. Second year is actually randomized. First year students, though, it is when you do submit the application. As I mentioned, you're not required to enroll at Gonzaga or submit a housing deposit before completing the application. So it is important, even if you don't know if you're going to be attending GU, to submit a housing application just in case. And then applications submitted after June 1st, unfortunately, will not receive a time slot. Our assignments team will assign you a space, but it's going to be after room selection has been completed. And as well as students who did receive a time slot, but didn't select a room by the June 16th deadline, our team will also assign a space for you. That isn't necessarily the space, the end all be all. We do offer something in the summer called room swap and shop. So for whatever reason, if you didn't get the application complete by June 1st, or if you did complete the application, you got a time slot, but unfortunately you couldn't choose or you didn't choose before the deadline, we do offer something called room swap and shop, where you will be able to see other spaces that maybe weren't selected, or potentially swap with someone in a space upon the other person agreeing. So, and then we always like to remind people the demand sometimes for certain styles of housing does exceed the supply. So sometimes buildings will go quick. So if you do have a later time slot, we just recommend having multiple preferences, having a couple different options. As Josephine mentioned, we do try to create community in all of our residence halls. You know, it's not just the larger ones that have it. The RAs, the RDs do a really good job of creating community inside all of our residence halls. Alrighty, so I mentioned roommate matching a couple times. We're kind of talk about what that looks like, and as you'll see at the top of the slide, it does say roommate matching is optional. So it's not a must. You don't have to do it. It is an optional ability or tool that we do give students to create roommate groups. One benefit of creating a roommate group when it comes to time slots and it comes to selection is if I were to be in a roommate group with a friend, and let's say hypothetically I had a 5 p.m. time slot and my friend had a 2 p.m. time slot, my friend could go to Zag Living and select the space for us. And so as long as I'm a part of that roommate group, when they go in to select, they will see me as well, and they will have an option to put me into that space. So like I said, it is an option. It is a tool. If you do know people that will be attending Gonzaga with you, you can always search for roommates by their name. If you don't, you can always search for roommates by their profiles and how they answer the questions, and look up suggested roommates based on profile questions as well. And it'll give you a percentage of how well they match with them. So if you don't know anyone, but you'd still like to be in a roommate group, that could be another avenue to figure out who you might match well with. Roommates must both be accepted to LLCs in the same building. So what this means is if I was in outdoor pursuits and I wanted to be a part of a roommate group with someone who was in Cura Personalis, unfortunately that couldn't happen because Cura Personalis is in Coghlan Hall and outdoor pursuits is in Marion. And so I'd have to find someone who was also in outdoor pursuits, or if I was in a Coghlan LLC, if I was in Cura Personalis, and my roommate, the friend I wanted to create a roommate group with, was in Learns the Lead, we could still create a roommate group because we both would be in Coghlan Hall. So, and then like I said, the caveat at the end, you do not need to match with a roommate before room selection. And in fact, I would say majority of students don't match, don't have a roommate group. I think it's a little different when it comes to second year students, just because, like I mentioned, it is suite and apartment style. So there's more people in those spaces, up to 6. In a traditional style, it is only just 2. So I would say the majority of first year students don't end up creating a roommate group, and they just go in as an individual, select a space, and then create relationships that way. Alrighty, so roommate matching tips and tricks. The first thing is we highly encourage students and only students to complete the Zag Living profile and to be as honest with yourself and others when you're answering the question. And the reason for that is we want to try to find the most accurate roommate matching percentage. If you haven't filled out the application, the housing application, there will be a portion called the compatibility survey, and we're going to ask a variety of questions. You know, how active you think you'll be on campus, how do you view your personal items in a shared space, will you have a job when you're on campus, how often do you participate in outdoor activities or video games or reading or socializing. And we just encourage students to answer those questions as honestly as they can, not necessarily for how you think you should answer those questions, but just personally how you feel about those topics, because that will determine how well you do match or how well you share the percentage with someone else. As well as those profiles can be updated. So maybe you felt a certain way your first year, and then you go into your second year and you don't feel that way or don't feel as strongly anymore. You can update those profile questionnaires. And then we say look for a roommate that you will live well with and not who you think you'll be a new best friend. And the reason we say that is because I think in an ideal world, you would think that, you come to Gonzaga, you get a roommate, you guys end up being best friends, and the rest is history, which there could be cases of that. And I've definitely heard people who've gone that way. But I think it's also important to think about maybe the honest conversations you'll need to have, creating clear communication. And so sometimes what you're looking for in a roommate might not be what you're looking for in a best friend slash just because you don't end up being best friends with the person you room with doesn't mean it wasn't a successful or fruitful living situation. So we just, kind of remind students to maybe adjust their expectations or kind of look at it through a different lens rather than trying to live with a best friend. So, alrighty. So the room selection process, kind of how that will look on Zag Living. So, like I mentioned, on June 11th, you will receive an email through your Zag mail, and it will let you know your time slot if you did complete the deadline by June 1st, as well as detailed instructions on how to view and select rooms. So I'll give you kind of a step-by-step on how to do that on Zag Living. So when you are on Zag Living, you are selecting, you will be able to see vacancies in buildings and in rooms and determine which room might be best for you and your roommate to select. Like I mentioned, if you are accepting an LLC, that will be the only building you'll see. So if you're in an LLC that is in Coghlan, you will not see Catherine Monica rooms, you won't see Madonna rooms or Marion rooms. You'll only see the Coghlan spaces that are available. If you do select as just an individual, you don't have a roommate group. If you go into a space, you will be able to see if someone else also selected that space. And so you can potentially see if you would be a good roommate match with them before you do end up selecting that space. Alrighty, and then we do have picking the right room, and we do put that in quotations just because that could be different for everyone. We talk about, be thoughtful and prioritize your must-have amenities. So what does that look like for you? I mean, does that look like, is it the size of the residence hall that matters? Maybe it's you want a single gender residence hall. So maybe you're thinking of just Smet or Welch, or maybe you want a mixed gender residence hall. So you're thinking of CM or Madonna. And so we just ask, just think about what would make this a good living experience for you and kind of what your preferences might be. We do say think about the experience you're interested in. That could be connected to a living learning community. It could be connected to how social you think the hall might be. If your preference is, after classes and other activities that you're in, if you're just saying, hey, you know what, I just want to go study in my room at night, maybe the size of the residence hall matters. Maybe a smaller residence hall that might lend itself to being a little bit quieter would be your best preference. If at the end of the day you decide that, I'd like to engage and continue to meet people, maybe it would be a larger residence hall that would fit you well. So we do kind of just ask that you think about these things as you're going through, as you're looking at these residence halls. And then we also say consider where you're taking classes and spend most of your time. We do encourage you, if you can look at a map of the campus and kind of see, what academic buildings may be around, what is it Hemmingson that you'd want to be close to. It's the mailroom you want to be close to. And so if there are, if you know what you're studying, if there are certain academic or other buildings on campus that you'll be spending a lot of time, we do encourage you to potentially look at that because maybe that's what you want most in your residence hall. So we talked about the application process. We talked about the residence halls and kind of picking the right one. So I will pass it along to Josephine, who will kind of go into, after you select your space, what moving in might look like.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. So we'll be going into a little bit of what that timeline looks like for move-in day for incoming students. So if you choose Gonzaga or you've already chosen Gonzaga, what does it look like when you come to campus? So that'll be on the next slide. So all of our new students move in on Friday, August 23rd. Our new students move in at a different time than our returning students. So it will be all new students coming to campus, getting oriented to the space before the rest of our student population comes. So August 23rd, Friday, is when you'd be moving in. Students are assigned a move-in time between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. on that Friday, August 23rd. This is just to help with traffic and also especially for the case of, for example, Catherine Monica, when there's 340 beds, can get a little crowded when trying to move in. So that's what's helpful in trying to stay cognizant of that move-in time that you've been assigned. You'll be picking up your key and your ZAG card from a one-stop check-in tent that is usually in a central location to campus, usually fully lawn, which is right in front of our library. This is there'd be plenty of signage on campus to help you find your way to that space. The reason why you'd be picking up a key and a ZAG card, the key, almost all of our actual rooms inside of our residence hall are access through key access, so a physical key that you'd be getting. And then our buildings, on the other hand, are swipe access. So you'd be getting a ZAG card. Your ZAG card would give you access to your personal resident hall building, as well as our all of our main academic and other buildings on campus. So the library, Hemmingson, which is our main center, it has our main dining hall option in it. You'd also have access to College Hall and some of our other main buildings on campus where you'd be taking your classes. Something else to note as well, your ZAG card is what you'd be would be connected to your meal plan, as well as what we call ZAG bucks. Whatever meal plan you get is in relationship with the amount of ZAG dollars you'll have. You can use those on campus or off campus. So that's something else that is connected to the ZAG card. In the case that you lose your ZAG card or your key, this is where resident assistants as well as campus security can assist with. There's also methods to get your ZAG card replaced and or your key replaced as well in that case. But obviously, the ideal situation is that you'd be able to track these so you don't have to go through the hassle of getting those figured out. Also, on move-in, volunteers are available to help carry your items in. So these volunteers would be current students on campus, our resident assistants who, like I had mentioned before, are those mentors that live within the halls, as well as residence directors overseeing that space. So I'd be one of them, and then one of my any of my 7 colleagues as well around campus, as well as some faculty and staff choose to also decide to volunteer. So plenty of help. It is a full campus effort to make sure that you are getting into your residence halls okay. And then some of our frequently asked questions we get in regards to move-in are listed on the screen there. So what can I not bring to campus? Some of them are obvious, some of them might not be as obvious. Candles, open flames, open heat cooking appliances, weapons, space heaters, AC units, pets, or large furniture items. There are some caveats to this. So, for example, stovetops, single burners, toasters, anything that are open coil heating systems are ones that aren't allowed. If you have more questions of those particular appliances or things like that, you can go onto our housing website, and those are a more detailed list are offered there. Additionally, I want to give a caveat to pets. If you have gone through our disability access office and you have been given permission to have an emotional support animal on campus or have special permissions for pets on campus, that is absolutely approved. And then communication will be sent by our disability access office to whoever your roommate is in that space to just let them know that that's something to expect in the space as well. So pets without approval are not allowed unless it is a fish in a particular size gallon tank, which I don't know off the top of my head, but can also be found online. But if your pet has approval through the Disability Access Office, then no problem. And residence directors and RAs will be made aware to make sure that you don't um, get into any trouble for that. Another question we often get is, can I send mail to Gonzaga before I move in? Yes. Yes, you can send mail. After confirming you'll be attending Gonzaga, you'll be directed to register for a mailbox. You'll be able to send mail in August once you receive your MSC number. So if you're not familiar with an MSC number, it's basically like living in an apartment building and having your own mail slot box. Every student on campus has a mailbox number assigned to them. And so you'll be able to send your mail to the regular Gonzaga mailing address that you find online, and then you'll just want to input your personal MSC number. This has to do with if you're online ordering or if you have family and friends who are sending you things through the mail as well. And then one last question that we often get is, can I change my room on move-in day? The answer is no for this, with the caveat, one of which Sam had mentioned, there is a room swap and shop option during the course of the summer in the case that your rooming assignment or room situation didn't go according to plan, or you think you might have shifted what you're wanting for your housing options. So we do have those options available, but students do have the opportunity to request a room change beginning October 1st. So they'll be, once you have your roommate assigned, and you've gone through room swap and shop or have chosen not to go through room swap and shop, you will have to stay in your assigned room until that October 1st deadline when that opens up. And that's when we engage in that room swap and shop option as well. Just like you would in the summer, you'd want to make sure you go in with a couple of different housing options that you're interested or have indicated. And then it'll be based off of where we have spaces opening up, depending on where students are wanting to move from. So those are some of our frequently asked questions. Again, as a reminder, making sure that you're putting any questions you have into our Q&A portion that we can try to answer, or our lovely colleagues can answer as well. And then Sam can go into kind of our second year and beyond portion.
Awesome. Thank you, Josephine. Yeah, so obviously this is a first year webinar, but we kind of want to give you a little glimpse of what second year and beyond could look like when it comes to housing. So as I mentioned, there is a residency requirement. Incoming students are required to live on campus for 2 years. So your first and second year housing is required on campus. After that, though, students are not guaranteed housing after living on campus for the 2 years. So it might seem crazy to think about housing when in your third year, but time really does fly. So as you get on campus, as you're living the first and second year, it is good to kind of, see the community, see the greater Spokane community as you develop relationships, maybe have an idea of potentially places you would want to live off campus. Now, we do have upper division housing available, but unfortunately, it is limited. So we have the 2-year live-on requirement for first and second year. After that, housing is limited. So it isn't a guarantee that you'll live on campus, but we do also provide resources for students looking for houses or apartments off campus. GonzagaOffCampus.org is the one that we facilitate. And that actually is landlords in the community who are posting apartments or housing. And so you can go to gonzagaoffcampus.org. You can click the different tabs, the apartment tab, the housing tab, and you can kind of see what is listed in the area. And as well as you're developing relationships, potentially finding those apartments and houses off campus. So what does second year housing look like? So like I said, there's 3 different housing processes. There's upper division housing, there's second year housing, and there's first year housing. Second year housing does occur early spring of your first year. It'll be done on ZAG Living, just as first year housing and upper division housing. The style of housing does change, so it does change to suite style and apartment styles, as well as if you did enjoy your first year LLC experience, there is an opportunity for second year LLC experience done as well through ZAG Living, that application process. And then we always say, just have preferences. So if you get on campus and you know people in second year housing, you get to a feel for that. Just kind of remember, hey, maybe I'd like to live in Kennedy in second year. Maybe I'd like to live in Galler second year. So think about those. We are building a new suite style building that will be opening in January 2025. Which the next slide is a rendering of what that potentially will look like. I know that I was told today that they are actually potentially going to release the name of the new building. So definitely check social media for that in the future. And then we kind of encourage recommended resources. If you're not familiar with campus, we do offer resources to get, to look at schematics, to get a virtual tour possibly. So if you I just always type in Gonzaga housing options through Google, and the first link is going to take you straight to the housing options. It's going to list traditional style housing. It's going to list suite style housing. It's going to list apartment style housing. If you click those tabs, it'll take you to those styles that we offer. And if you click those specific tabs, like say you click Welch, it's going to show a video. So you get a virtual tour. It's going to show all the amenities that the building provides. And it's going to show a picture of how the room layout is, as well as at the bottom of the screen, there's going to be a link to the building diagram. And just like on this PowerPoint screen, it's going to show a schematic of the building layout. So before room selection happens, if you're curious about where the rooms are located, what the building looks like, if you weren't able to take a tour, if you're not able to see it before housing selection takes place, there are resources online that you'll be able to look at to kind of see and where you might want to live and help you choose a certain location. Awesome. So for slides, that is it. So we did reserve some time for some potential questions. I don't know if anyone has those, or if there maybe was some common themes or common questions that came up during the PowerPoint.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much to Sam and Josephine for this wonderful presentation. We do have some questions, and as folks, we are still accepting them, so please feel free to continue to use the Q&A function to ask those questions, and we'll get to as many as we can in the chat as well as out loud. But just to clarify, and I know Sam mentioned it in the presentation, the application to submit the housing application lives on your application portal. So that is your application portal that you received your admission decision on and through. So that's an easy way to access that housing application. So please go there and you'll log into that using the email that you posted on the Common App. Students were able to submit questions prior to the webinar. So one that you hinted at a little bit, Josephine, when it came to accommodations for pets, but can you go over just more generally what the accommodations process would look like, specifically ones that may result in single rooms? That's one that we got quite a few of in the registration form.
Yeah, Alexa, just to clarify, would this be going through Disability Access Office, or would this be those small aquatic animals that are approved?
Yeah, so looking for students who may have necessary or who may need accommodations in housing. And of course, we know, right, that they start with that Disability Access Office, but can you just talk about what that process looks like once they reach out to the Disability Access and how that's communicated with the housing office and what some of those accommodations may look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of having pets on campus, once you've contacted the Disability Access Office, they'll be working with you as an individual, looking at what your accommodations are needed in terms of having that pet, especially kind of what Alexa had mentioned, whether there's that additional element of wanting to have your own room versus having living in suite style if you're in your sophomore living housing, or if you want to have those ESA pets without having a roommate in the space. Once that's decided with the Disability Access Office, we as housing take those directives immediately from the Disability Access Office. So whatever's decided between you and them in terms of the appropriate accommodations for you, that's then shared with us. And then Sam and some of my other colleagues will then work on finding spaces that meet those accommodation requirements. So, specifically, whether it's a single room or whether it would still be working with a roommate. Once that's decided, that's then communicated with me as a residence director and then with the RAs. You wouldn't be put in housing that's separate from the rest of the dorm. It would be like a normal traditional style room. You would, if you indicated and it was decided upon with the Disability Access Office that you'd have a single room, it would look exactly like that traditional style setup. You would just have all of your belongings on one side, and then the rest of the room would be empty for the remainder of the year, if that's what's indicated, to have that space. Some additional costs could be added. I think Dory even mentioned that in the chat. Could be added depending on damages to the space. Moving out of that space is done through a walkthrough with the residence director or the RA in conjunction with a representative from our plant services office, just to ensure that the space doesn't have any damages or stains that were caused by the animals in question. And then that is done with the student present, and potentially those any changes to the room or any damages are seen could cause there to be a couple of different cost differences for that. I'm trying to think of anything else that we've navigated with students with pets. I would also mention Disability Access Office again works directly with students depending on your emotional support animal. If you have an ESA, not necessarily does it have to fit the qualifications of some of our more general animals. We've had individuals with ESAs that are a variety of different animals as well. So that's just something that has seemed to come up in question to me by some residents, that ESA and working with the Disability Access Office might not necessarily mean a cat or a dog. And our plant services department is aware and knowledgeable of the needs of different animals in the space too. Does that answer the question, Alexa?
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Another question is more for transfer students. I know that the timelines were provided are for our first year students, but do they also apply for transfer students, or can you talk about what that timeline looks like? And also if there are any exceptions or special conditions for our transfer students living on campus?
Yeah, so transfer students will actually be selecting with first year students as well. So the timeline shouldn't be too different when it comes to the application process. It's going to be in June when transfer students will be selecting, as well as move-in dates shouldn't vary too much, but more communication will be sent out as far as when those exact move-in dates will be. But yes, so first year and transfer students will be selecting at the same time as well.
Awesome. Thank you. We've got a couple questions about FAFSA and aid for housing. So that will depend on the individual student's FAFSA, and that's something you'll work on with the financial aid office. So as you know, there are delays to the FAFSA this year. If you haven't already, we do encourage students and their families to submit an estimated financial aid offer and get in contact with our with our financial aid office if you have any concerns about that. But that is so far all of the questions that we have, and it is 7 o'clock. So we will wrap up there. I want to say a huge thank you to Sam and Josephine and Dory for answering everyone's questions in such a thorough presentation. Again, this will be recorded and posted to our website. So please look there for any future questions or to refer back to this presentation. I'm also going to ask my colleague Sarah to put in the chat the links to find your admission counselor. If we didn't get to your question or you have more specific questions, please reach out to the Office of Admission and your admission counselor. We are happy to get you connected with the housing office or answer any other questions you have about Gonzaga and making that college decision. We'll also put a link in the chat to our virtual tour. That virtual tour does include a virtual residence hall tour and is a great way to kind of walk through the different residence halls and be able to find that there. But thank you so much, Sam, Josephine, and Dory, and we hope everyone else has a great rest of their night.